Thank you, thank you, thank you. How y'all doing? I need more energy than that. How y'all doing? That's what I'm talking about. We got all these illustrious black people in the building, and y'all gonna give me that mediocre greeting? I need more energy. All right. So, thankfully, if you guys can go ahead and click to the next slide so I can see the pictures, because I want to bring them out in sequence. There we go. So what we're gonna do next is we're gonna introduce Jeffrey Henderson. Come to the stage, my brother. Come on to the stage. Yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. Then we have, come on, take a seat right here, Jeff. You well-educated, brother. Go ahead and sit down. We got Mr. Scoop Jackson coming to the stage. Yeah. We got my ace and my CCS alumnus, Mrs. Sydney James. Come on to the stage. Let's go, Sid. All right, then we have Kenneth, Anand coming to the stage, my brother that protects all my intellectual property, so holler at him if you need any legal advice. All right, all right. Yeah, so the reason why we wanted to convene this panel is that the topic of entrepreneurship needs to truly be explored in the context of this industry. Too many times we demonize people who are employees, and we do not educate people that you are sovereign and you can control your destiny once you know your worth. This industry does not give you your worth. We give this industry worth. I don't need any company to give me value, okay? We are the culture. We don't need them to sell it back to us. Each person on it, y'all gonna get this energy all day. This is me in the morning. This is me in a quiet place. I'm on 10, and this is not even 100. So imagine when I'm really turned. And the reason why this is important is because for far too long, we settle for scraps instead of saying that we want the full meal. We settle for things that they give us instead of creating space for one another. We look at each other as collaborators and competitors instead of a community where all of us collectively can be better when we put our ideas in motion, okay? So this is 20 years. Preach. 20 years of a strategic decision that we made in Oregon to never, ever, ever hate on one another, to push each other forward and to celebrate each other. And oh, by the way, as black men, we're men. We have to make space for the sisters. So look around and realize that this couldn't exist unless a group of us decided to put ourselves to the side and make space for each other. So with that, I'm gonna calm down before I start preaching or making y'all run some 100s to do push-ups. But with that,
I do want to plate out there.
I do want to make sure that you guys know, each person up here is an entrepreneur and has gone on a tremendous journey. And what I want to do first is I want to kick it off with the concept of ownership. So the first person I want to speak to is Sydney. Could you please talk to us about how you view ownership and why that's critically important in the context of our culture?
Well, thank you for making me first, I guess. I look at ownership in the whole of it, from small big things like owning your property, like keeping your bills low, owning your car, because that gives you creative freedom to move about how you feel, right? And that way, these companies can't really dictate your moves because you're not like constantly chasing a check. But also owning your work. You could literally own a piece of artwork and make a shit ton of money off of it just by licensing, and you still own your work. So copyright, licensing, which this Esquire here will get into later, is super important. And then owning your brands. Like if you watch that Bob Ross documentary that came on Netflix, he didn't even own his name when he died. His sons still don't own his name. So once you become the brand, because it's not just your work, after a certain point, it's you, especially now that it's social media. So it's what you're putting out there, it's what you're putting out there as far as yourself. You are the brand. So you got to own yourself, own your name, own your work, and, make sure you read your contracts and keep your bills low.
You heard her. You heard her. You heard her. You heard her. Key emphasis on manage your operational expenses, okay? That's your personal burn rate. Do not live beyond your means. It's not cool to be broke and stylish. Just be stylish and wealthy. Or choose something else besides spending your money on something that really holds no residual value. So moving over to holding value, I want to talk to Scoop about ownership. Like in your capacity, you have a unique situation with a large corporation. Could you explain how that works?
My situation, I'm ESPN, my situation is a little bit different because technically I'm an independent contractor. I started my own company in 1991 and I functioned everything I've done through that. I learned a long time ago as I came out of school, nothing against school. But as
We'll
I
get into
came
that.
out of school, business respects business. Business does not respect individuals. So you have to present yourself as a business. So I incorporated a business the minute I got out of graduate school, and I functioned through that. So everything I've ever done over the last 30 years has been with and through my business. So I function as that. And it gives me, to your ownership piece, it gives me a sense of ownership in things that I present and things I work with the people that I happen to work with. Ownership in my situation and how I flowed allows me to never use the word boss. I do not believe in the word boss. We work together. I don't work for you. And that's the way my mentality is. And I think we all should have the mentality, but you have to be in a position to have that mentality. So that's kind of how it's worked for me, and working with companies as big as like ESPN and Disney, and all the stuff we did with Slam Magazine, XXL, all the stuff that we were able to do. I look at everybody that I've had a relationship with from a work standpoint. I look at them as business partners, and I look at them as, to a certain degree, clients, because I'm providing work for them, and that's how we roll. But last thing I want to say about ownership, that was just my thing. I think generally we need to understand from a perspective of creators and content is that there are two types of ownership. There is physical ownership and there's spiritual ownership. And as black creators in this room, you're gonna do stuff that you own, but you're doing it for somebody who actually physically owns it. The ownership that we have is the shit we take to the grave with us. The stuff that we put out there that nobody else can do. That's our spiritual ownership. So while we talk about ownership, understand in my situation and in my mind, it works two ways. And we have to find a way to make sure we deal with one, that physical. But what the ownership of the creativity we take to the grave, nobody else can replicate that. And that's what we put out to the world.
Facts. So know your worth. Know your worth. Now, I do have to apologize to this brother because he's the king of wabi-sabi and symmetry. So we were supposed to come out and order these pictures. And so he's upset we didn't come out in the right order. But
Ain't in order. We ain't in order.
the beautiful thing about Jeff is while we're talking about entrepreneurship, some of us are wondering, well, how do I get a start? I don't have the competency. I don't have the revenue. I don't have the network. I don't have the resources. But there is another version called intrapreneurship, finding opportunities within a large organization and then taking advantage of those gaps. This gentleman right here, Jeff, could you talk about what you've done in this industry, specifically during our time at the Swoosh, how you carved out a totally new lane for yourself?
Very much so, very much so. So I started at Nike back in the late 1900s, had a great job.
Year of the
Funny. It was a while
1900s.
ago. It was a while ago. I was playing a cassette tape in my car.
What's a
I
car?
wasn't really good at my job when I got in design when I started. So I was not really owning my craft. I had to get better. I had to learn. Once I got better at my craft, then I had this expectation that the whole world would come to me. Oh, we'll give you the projects. We'll take what projects you do. It'll all be good. That didn't happen. I was frustrated. I spent 3 years in a job that really wasn't working for me. But after a year of it, I went to, and if you don't know Ray Butts, please find Ray Butts, the godfather of black design in Nike. Like, he's the one who made sure
Facts.
things happened for us. When I went to him to complain, and as people come to me and complaining about, this job ain't really working for me, he said, go find some other shit to do. And so Sharice, when she said she went to the Black Employee Network and she got other opportunities in terms of leadership, in terms of building something, what happens is, even in a corporation, because what I don't want people to get into the mindset of is that, oh, I want to own something, I'm going to have an LLC, I'm going to own my own thing. You can own something even while you work for somebody else, because what happens is they have other money to spend. And they give other people opportunities, and you can be those other people. You just have to deliver a business plan for them. So the thing that I brought was, strangely enough, an art outreach program. They were already giving money to people on Nike campus, designers, to go speak to people. And I was like, I'll take some of that money. We'll go to SEI in Northeast Portland. And I was lucky enough to have people like Jason Mayden, E. Scott Morris, Dwayne Edwards come with me. And that's how we spent their money helping kids in Northeast Portland see what these opportunities were. So even if you are at a company, you can still be entrepreneurial. You can still find other ways to own things.
Yes. Clap for that, because I don't want nobody in here that works for a company feeling bad, right? Because I'm just going to be frank with you guys. We're watching the media, and we see people demonizing folks who are employees. Like, that is a bad word, okay? It is not a bad word. It is not a bad thing to start somewhere. All of us have to take a shot. All of us have to get a job. All of us have to make a living. The interesting piece is there are some of us that protect the ideas and set up new structures, that build new entities so that we can generate new opportunities and create new value. Kenneth here is a person who does that exceptionally well. I would love for you to speak about how you've done it, what you're doing, and why it's important for us to understand truly the various definitions of ownership that you actually have a command over.
So thank you for that. I mean, I think we've heard from all very talented and creative individuals with their own concepts of ownership. Each one of you out there will have your own journey through ownership as you progress as creatives. You may be an employee and you may be making products that are for the masses that you don't own any of. Or you may work for yourself and you may own all of it, but are for a very small group of people. Now, the amount of ownership that you have is directly related to the amount of control you have, but it could be also inversely proportional to the amount of distribution level or the reach. When we created Sneaker Law, and it's a book that we wrote about the sneaker industry, we decided we wanted to own our own masters because we would be hypocritical to be making a book about entrepreneurialism and not own our own masters, not tell people this is how it should be done. As an aside, if I went with a publisher, I probably would have had a much larger reach. And Jared and I would have had a much larger reach, but we made this decision. So we're growing our brand slowly. We have more control, we have more profit, but our reach is lower. So you have to make a decision as a creative in this business. Am I gonna go the route where my reach is very large and wide, but I may not own things, or I may not own as much of it? Or do I wanna own all of it, but serve a specific community or a specific target group? And I think that's incumbent upon you as designers and creatives to understand and know, and hopefully we can help with that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that also goes back to your why. I know we discussed it on Thursday.
Yep.
The creatives always having a why, or should have a why. Even if your why, I just want to do something pretty, that's still a why. And that always helps guide whatever your journey will be, whether it's entrepreneurship or working for somebody else. Your why is going to drive all of those things.
Both completely valid. Both
And keep in mind, you can do both.
Yes.
You don't have to do one or the other.
Yes.
You can do both. You can provide content and provide and give and loan your creativity to somebody that you're working for, and you can still have your own and do it that way. Now, you're going to be up 24 hours a day, but if you got to do it, that's what you got to do.
That's the creative way anyway.
That's right.
Yeah, sponsored by coffee and no sleep. Brought to you by insomnia. Now, the interesting piece I think you all should double click on is you've heard every single person that spoke talk about we. It takes more than just one person to bring a vision to life, right? If it's just you, it's a hallucination. If someone else sees it, it's a vision. If someone else believes in it, it becomes an organization and a brand or a partnership. Now, switching gears from ownership, the concept of partnership is something we've heard a lot about in our culture, but I don't think people really understand the structure of partnerships and what that truly means. So if we could take a second and come back to Kenneth from an attorney perspective, and then each person speak to their own unique experiences. How do you see partnership, and what do you see a healthy partnership being?
Sure. Well, I won't bore you with the legal aspects of partnership. You can read about them in my book or other books.
Cop the book is what he's saying. Cop the book. It's an entrepreneur.
Available where?
Support the man.
Available where?
Where's the book at? Amazon, direct to consumer.
No, but the concept of partnership is really, it's a communion. It's working together with someone on a common goal, and just like in a marriage, just like in a friendship, you have to pick your partners wisely. And, I've had experience with all kinds of partnerships, some that worked, some that didn't. We've seen certain situations play out in the news lately about partnerships that haven't gone right for certain people. And we can understand those dynamics, but the contracts that go behind them are only one part of it. It's really how you act and how you carry out things and how you work with your partners to make sure you achieve a common goal. So, there's the legal side of it, there's the practical side of it. I'm sure all of these fine people will have great things to say about the practical side.
Sydney, I would love to hear your perspective.
So I've had several brand partnerships from Under Armour, Vans, Pepsi.
Talk your talk.
I know.
Go on, sis, talk your talk.
This is really dropping right now. Ford Motor Company, GM.
Talk your talk.
Yeah.
Hey, when else we get to brag on ourselves? Talk your talk.
So I go back to say, I said all that to say, the reason why most of my brand partnerships are successful is really work ethic, being timely with my paperwork, like really, like of course being a dope artist, many people think that that's all it takes. Oh, I'm so great, they should just want to pay me and they should just want to work with me, but that is not true. You have to be good to work with. That means W-9s, 1099s, whatever the paperwork they asking you for, you deliver it before the due date. Now, and you make sure you know your specs. Is say like just with my Vans partnership, like we had to deliver the artwork had to be a certain size. If you're not sure, ask questions. Never be afraid to learn. Never be afraid to ask questions. Never be afraid to reach out to your client just to double back and make sure you got it right. And read your contract. Hire a lawyer, pay whatever, like try to find somebody reasonable or somebody that, at least a paralegal that can help you with the language, because it's always wordy, words. And it's
You,
overwhelming, you know what I mean? But this also goes back to paperwork, to ownership, making sure you're not getting played out of your, out of your situation. Don't, because you might be accidentally signing a work for hire contract instead of a license agreement. And make sure your license agreement makes sense. Like you getting enough, like the right amount of money for like a year, a limited amount of time, but not a little bit of money for them to license your shit for 10 years, because then it don't make no sense, right? So just make sure that you have the right team around you, or the right folks around you, and make sure that you're a help for those others. As soon as you learn something, you make sure to teach it too.
Facts. Now shifting it to Scoop, in your world, in journalism, how do you see healthy partnerships manifesting? What does that look like?
That's interesting, because writing can be a very individual, solo, lonely experience. But in order for your writing to be placed out into the world, you have to partner with somebody. So you're partnering with a publisher, you're partnering with a site, you're partnering with a magazine, a publisher of a magazine. You're partnering with somebody because your content has to go somewhere. So your job as a journalist is to find out what's in the best interest for your content and for what they're trying to do on their end with it. So you have to, it's almost like a dance. You all have to be in sync with one another to make everything happen correctly. We always say in the I'll say the publishing business, it's very simple. It's about ideas and execution. That's your partnership. Your ideas, somebody else's execution. If you lay that out, everything will be fine. But that's from a journalism standpoint. From an entrepreneurial standpoint, partnership to me is the minute you pick up the phone. The minute you shake somebody's hand or give them a hug. That's when partnerships, especially with us as black creators and black entrepreneurs, the minute we say, hey, you know what, here's my number, call, and that phone rings and you answer it, that's when the partnership starts. And you have to, as an entrepreneur, you have to be there for that person throughout the entire ride that they're going through, because they called you for a reason. Or somebody walks up to you today and say, hey, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do that. Yo, let's build. When that let's build comes out of your mouth, it has to be real, and that's when that partnership starts. So whatever interaction you have, however you all communicate, that's what partnership is. And you're there with them when they started off. You there with them 5 years when it fails. You there with them for 50 years when they picking up awards and like owning whatever it is that they do. That's the entrepreneurial side of partnership.
Thanks. Clap for that, man. Yes. I think the key piece, that's real. The key piece, what he's saying, I hope you picked up that gem. If not, I'm going to give you a second to dig it out, process it, is accountability. We live in a world where people say things that have no substance. Holla at me, dog. I never answer my phone. Yeah, G, I see you and we going to get up. I never show up. The interesting piece about an idea is it dies the moment you hand it to someone else and they don't believe in it. Now, talking to Jeff specifically, he's in a position now to bring people's ideas to life. He's going to be in a spot very soon as one of the only, if only, black-owned manufacturing services, large-scale manufacturing services in the United States. what's important about that is the moment we pick up the phone and say, I want to make something, this brother is now focusing on the value chain and the supply chain. We hear about the supply chain, individual actors in a sequence to allow something to come to market. Then there's the value chain, each person that benefits from that activity. Jeff is building both. So in that case, how do you see partnership, both being a designer, but now on the other side where you're responsible to bring other people's ideas to life?
So appreciate all the love for that. I think one of the biggest things that I've learned with a few partners, and that's become a learning experience. So I want everybody to know that none of us just showed up and said, oh, we know how to have a partnership, and it worked immediately on everything we did. We all had stumbles. We all had, oh, this partnership didn't work. We don't talk to that person. It might be my fault. It might be their fault. Those are things you learn.
It's their fault.
She's talking about our partnership.
Petty LaBelle. Petty LaBelle on stage, ladies and
But
gentlemen.
the reality is you learn. I had a friend who said, you want to know that your personality matches the paperwork. And so what comes with that means that some of the conversations I get into with some people, when we have the agreement, just verbally, this is what we're going to do, that was enough. That was a big deal. The paperwork then matched that conversation. But there were some people who didn't work like that. Until we got to the paperwork, they were never really into it. And I watched how everything would unfold before the paperwork even got there because they were so worried about all these little things. And then I would understand that our personalities aren't going to mesh. And I think that was a learning experience for me in terms of what partnership would mean, in terms of how you work with somebody that's willing to work with me. Not everybody is going to work with me well. I'm not for everybody, and everybody's not for everybody else. So I think that, to me, is how partnership comes about.
Can I say something?
No, please, brother, go
I want
ahead.
to also put out there that everything we're talking about on partnership does not necessarily have to mean that you all have to work together. And I'll give you an example. Have you and I ever worked together? Are we partners?
100% facts.
Now, not just like friends partner, but we've like...
No, we throwing hands. If we need to throw hands, we throwing hands, and it's like, I got
Right.
your back.
That's
I'm
what saying.
uncomfortable right now.
But you'll holler at me, I holler at you, we bounce stuff off of each other.
All the time.
And that's partnership. Now, we've never worked on a project, so understand partnership does not have to mean just a work relationship with somebody or somebody else, another group. It can be just about being with and there and for each other. All these years, we ain't never worked on anything together, but we have a work partnership.
I love
Because
this.
I apply some stuff that he's given me, he's applied some stuff that I've given him, and it's helped us out with our careers and our lives. So keep in mind that what we're talking about is not just relegated to just a one-on-one and work shit.
It's very human, not legal at all. I respect that.
It's the
Till you
truth.
break the law.
Call Kenneth.
Be partners then. We'll still be partners then.
More of this and
Then we're
less
calling
paper.
that guy, right?
No, those are accomplices. Do not confuse a partner with an accomplice. I do want to point that out there. That's totally different.
There's no paperwork
Feels
there.
like the same thing. It's totally not. Coke versus Pepsi. Now, the interesting piece of what everyone has touched on is we talked about ownership, partnership, but the topic that I really want to make popular in culture is stewardship. We do not own anything realistically. We are just stewards of the gifts and blessings that are bestowed to us from the Most High. And when you understand that concept of stewardship, you don't mind picking up the phone to give somebody free advice because you know that this is not something that's happening for you, it's happening in front of you and you want to give it. So I do want everybody to kind of touch on how are you being a good steward, or what is an example of good stewardship that you've seen in your journey? Anyone can jump in because I do think it's important that we have privilege and how do we use it? Because we talk about our disadvantages, but we got a lot of privilege too that we need to talk about and how we steward that.
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, for me, my sole and higher purpose in life is to help creative people get out their dreams. Like that, I believe that's what I was put on the planet for. And I've worked with all kinds of creatives. I grew up in a creative household, and I realized that I was better at supporting creatives than being one myself. And so through sneaker law, through my work with creatives in a legal capacity, through my work as a creative advisor, all I want to do is help support creatives. And I feel like I'm now at the point in my career where I can give that back, and I can hand out gems, and I can be there for people. I can answer LinkedIn DMs. I can do these things to just make life a little bit easier for creatives coming up in the game, because you'd be surprised. I still see people at the highest level struggling with legal issues, with business issues, because they didn't spend time learning it and because they've been taken advantage of. And so I devote probably 80% of what I do in my life to that now.
So you're talking about somebody with a purpose and turn that purpose into a vocation. Sydney, you are a steward of stories. visually, which means that what you put out can live in perpetuity. So
I'm
how
a
do you
steward
do
of
it?
space too.
Oh, talk to him. Go ahead. What does that mean?
So earlier today, I witnessed a beautiful thing, the Adidas panel this morning. I woke up for that. And several of the young women up here were CCS graduates.
Yes.
They are maybe, 6, 7 to 10 years after my experience there. And I know that I couldn't have a panel like that. Like, not coming from, and it's just, I'm just a generation after me. But it didn't exist for me.
No.
Right? So for many, many, many years of my career, any of my careers, from art direction, at advertising agencies, to even now mural painting, because that's what I know I'm known for now the most, is I'm a muralist. I would circulate all of these mural festivals, even in Detroit, and I would be one of very few black people, but always the only black woman. Always. From here to Hawaii, to wherever I was traveling to in these situations. Always, always, always the only black woman, and very, very, very few black people. So several years ago, like I want to say 19, we're at several now. That's crazy.
Wow.
2019, I was painting out in Denver, Colorado at Crush Walls. And another artist, Max Sansing, it was like 3 of us there at the same time. Like 3 out of 100 artists. Like, oh, we were just so geeked to see each other in the same space, same time. Because oftentimes, too, the same 5 to 10 black artists circulate the same thing. So it's not any new, you ain't gonna meet new faces because they only pulling from the ones that they know. But that don't mean that other dope artists don't exist. They just weren't pulling from those cities. So myself, Max Sansing, and Detour 303, we co-founded Blackout Walls Mural Festivals together.
Let's go.
We had our first, our inaugural festival last year in Detroit, here in Detroit. And it was the first of its kind for all of these super talented.
Let's hold space for that. Let's hold space for that. That's important. That's important.
Like, because they might be the shit in the city where they from, but they'd never get invited out. And so we had all of those, like, living legends, like, geeking out over each other in the same space, same time. And if I know many of you aren't from the city, but if you go travel through the North End, like Grand Boulevard, New Center area, you'll see all the walls. When you see beautiful black people painted beautifully, you'll know exactly what it is. But I say all that to say, and even with, like, we had brand sponsors, like the companies that I work with, that's who sponsored the festival. That's the partnership. But it's also the partnership working towards the stewardship, creating space, making introductions, and also teaching the artists that participate how I did it, teaching them about contracts. So my biggest practice, part of my biggest practice now is not just the act of creating, it's literally creating space for other people and teaching, and then making them, like, forcefully pay it forward if they don't want to do it naturally.
That's real. That's love. I think, so Scoop, you're our griot, right? You're the sneaker culture, sport culture's James Baldwin. You allow people to know we exist. Like, you gave a word and a voice to a culture that was just used to promote beverages and sneakers. Could you talk about stewardship and how important it is in the work you've done, how you've allowed us to exist on the page the way you've done it?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. It's more about just, to me, as far as stewardship is concerned, and what I've tried to do is walk with purpose and pride in every motherfucking thing I do.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And, you know, that's what stewardship is. You know, it's kind of corny to say lead by example, but you have to have a sense of establishing your worth. Not what you feel your worth is, but establishing your worth that has nothing to do with anything monetary. It has something to do with what I was saying earlier about what you take to the grave with you. That's stewardship, and you walking in that. There's a joke around ESPN that we've had for years. LZ Granderson, Jamil Hill, Jamil's not there anymore, but it's an old joke, between ourselves and myself. LZ is Martin Luther King. He calls us, we have nicknames for each other. LZ is Martin Luther King. Jamil is Malcolm X. and they named me Crispus Attucks. They said, because you the nigga that's going to get shot first. Seriously. But stewardship in real conversation is owning that and walking with that and leaving that legacy and that footprint in everything that you do, so that anybody who sees that, whether they're above you, behind you, right next to you, they recognize that footprint and know that there's another footprint moving forward to that, so they can move forward if they decide to follow that path. That's stewardship, and that's always been my experience. And, you know, even though it's a running joke that we have amongst each other, it's something I've taken pride in and tried to live by and make sure that as I'm moving forward, even if I get shot and killed.
You better not.
No, it might happen. That's cool.
I said you better not.
It might happen. It might happen. But if it does happen, I know that there is.
That ain't gonna happen. You know?
It's all good. You know, if it does happen, saying I know that I can rest well with a sense of knowing that I left something, and that leaving something is that stewardship that you talked about.
Amen.
I don't have to be here for it to move forward. If I continue to make every step I take purposeful and do it with a sense of pride, especially black pride, then I'm good.
That's it, man. That's it. That's it. That's it. Now, it's transitioning to you, Jeff. In your capacity, you've been an engineer, designer, entrepreneur, educator, dad, educational advocate. But more importantly, the thing that you've done personally in my life is you've always talked to me as the person I'm becoming next, not the person I am. When you first talked to me, you'd be like, superstar, superstar. You drilled into my brain what I thought I couldn't be. So talk about how the power of words has played out in your life in stewardship, because you do a great job of speaking life over people naturally without knowing it, in my experience. So how do you see yourself as a steward in this industry with that, that information?
So thank you for that. I think one of the big things that happened for me is that I didn't really have an appreciation for what I was stepping into when I got to Nike. I had no idea. I didn't know I was going to be third black designer. Like, I just went to draw shoes. And I think a lot of people have talked about stepping into these occupations, stepping into this industry, and knowing that you're carrying culture with you. Yo, that was too heavy for me on some days. Like, some days I just want to go and draw a shoe. That, to me, knowing that somebody's coming in to be able to do what they want to do, if they're carrying all that weight, just telling them, yo, just come in and draw a shoe. Like, today, you don't have to worry about it. You will be the superstar that you're going to become because you're going to do the work. And I think as I've gone through this, I've had the opportunity to go back and forth of who I was, whether I was a leader or just an executor. There were some days where I was in China working on the shoe that, Sam, the shoe that she's wearing right now, I got to go in and just work. I didn't have to do anything else but just work. Those were good days. I watched other people then say to me, you weren't here last week. You're our boss. And I'm like, no, I'm just a contractor. I just come in and like, hit man for hire. They're like, no, you just dragged us all into a room, told us what to do, and left. And then we did that. I had to learn that that was a skill that I had. I had to learn that was so even now, as I built my team, I built our creative team that is in Harlem based on, you don't get those opportunities everybody else gets, let's walk into the room. Come sit and be part of this. And now that we're building a factory, the sense of ownership, like, that's a lot of weight. Because now, I don't know what half of these jobs are. But I do know who to call. It goes back to partnership. I do know who to call to go, help me figure out how we're going to pay these people. Not just pay them in money, but in benefits. Make sure they get an education. Make sure they're actually out of this factory job in 3 years because they've come here. They've met all you people. And you've said, oh, you worked at that factory? That means you know what happened at Pensole. That means you know what you've met these people. Come now, go do this other thing. That becomes a bigger role. And that's one that I'm taking on now, but it comes with a lot of responsibility that I have to know that other people are going to be there with me.
Absolutely. Amen. So y'all have heard a whole bunch of information. So in summary, I'm an educator, so I'm going to give you a couple key points. You heard different concepts of ownership, okay? You understand the structures. We talked about partnerships and why it's important to have a team and other people you can share with. Talked about stewardship, knowing that you truly don't own anything. You're just the person responsible for sharing it and making sure it grows. But the key word that I want us to walk out of this auditorium understanding is relationship. Relationship. I showed up in Detroit in 1998 from the south side of Chicago, Wild Wild Hunteds, going to see south side, there we at. Yes, sir, yes, sir. I showed up here in 1998
Told
to
you
go
we might
to
get
see
shot, man. Chicago in the building, man.
And I wanted to design sneakers at CCS, but I was a person that was told constantly, no one does that for a job. It was people like Sydney and Tanisha, and I can go on and on with these cats from CCS, like Clifton, and oh my gosh, like so many folks who brought me in and
Really
said, we
like
see who
10
you are.
because it wasn't really that many black people for real, but he can make you think like it's more if he wants.
Nah, it was like 12 of us. We can split one pizza. That's how many of us
7
was
and
in
a
the room.
half.
That's how many black people were there. And so for me to sit here and to show up as a lone person wanting to design sneakers with no one telling me I could do it, now we have a whole school that looks like the person that they said I couldn't become. Yeah. Imagine that. Yeah. Imagine that. A whole school. That only can happen. That only can happen through relationships. And so with these last few minutes left, we want to open this up for any questions because we do want to build relationships with each of you so that this doesn't stop when we leave here. This is not a feel-good moment. This is a call to action. I don't want to hear people talking about these problems when we are the solution. So if you have questions, make sure that you hold yourself accountable. And where I come from, stand on your square. Don't back down for what you mean. Don't stare at the ground. Look people in the eye and ask for what you want. And if they don't give it to you, take it. So ask your questions and know that we're going to hold you accountable and so you can follow through. So anybody that wants to speak, please raise your hands. We got the first gentleman right here, then we'll bounce around the room.
Microphone up there.
You back here? Okay, we're going to go up here to the mic and we'll come back to you, brother. Make sure we get the sisters too. Go ahead, brother.
How you doing? I'm Ready Rick. I own my own brand called Rich Young. My question was for Jeff. I heard about the manufacturing company, so I was trying to see, are you manufacturing clothes or just shoes? And if so, I'm definitely interested in working with you if you're doing clothes, even shoes too. But I've been in this game since 2013. I done worked with a lot of Caucasian manufacturer, and they just don't get the style and the time I put into it. They always tell me they can't do it because it'd be too much. So I'm looking more now to work with more black manufacturers and more black people that do the stuff that I like to do, and that got the time and got the style and got the energy to produce it.
Appreciate that. The question was, how can you get into manufacturing? What am I actually working on? So what I'm focused on is footwear manufacturing at a large scale. That is not something that, right now, people are doing customization, people are doing small scale. And so for my personality, what I really want to do in order to provide more jobs, more opportunities, and actually run a business that works, is I'm going super, super, super large scale, focused on sustainability. Bringing it to the US because those are the partners that I have. When I was going to China every 3 months, when I was going to Vietnam every 3 months and trying to figure out what was going on, to me that was one of those things that I was absorbing. Apparel, maybe next on the list, find me. We'll have that conversation. I'm more of a footwear person, but I've had other conversations today that were like, are you going to do apparel? So now I have to think about it because it's meaningful. Thank you.
Facts. All right, next question. I'm not sure who has the mic. Right here? Okay. Take it, bro.
Hello. This question is for Scoop. So basically, from the beginning, you said business respects business, right? So my question is, once you got out of school, how was you able to like demand that respect from a business, even though you technically were an individual, but you were just presenting it as a business, you know?
Yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying. The first thing I did was I was kind of forced into it. Graduated from school, started freelance writing, which a lot of journalists do, you know, once you get out of school. Basically, it's journalistic prostitution. you just writing for anybody who's gonna give you a check, because you're just trying to establish yourself, right? And I learned very early that a few things happen in that. Sometimes you don't get that check. Sometimes the work you give them never looks like the work that you gave them. And other times, both things happen at the same time. Your work doesn't show up and you don't get a check. So I just really basically was like, you know what? Why am I doing this, trying to find an audience, when I can do this myself? So instead of writing for all these other magazines, I was always teaching classes during the day, but I started basically investing in myself. So I took the money I was making for teaching classes during the day, and started my own company. I just went and articles of incorporation, registered Strong Island Media as a company, and started my own magazine. Started off with one-page magazine, which was a newsletter, put it in black-owned businesses in Chicago. Then about 2 years into that, it became a 36-page magazine that I had in like 5 different black-owned stores across the bookstores in the country. And once that started, everything bounced from there. So that's what I basically did, and it's, it's still functional to this day. While the company is still small, it's still basically me, it is still a company, and I do have representation. I've always had a lawyer that always does everything. Every deal I sign, you don't speak to me, you speak to my lawyer. So every deal is signed that way, and they don't know if I got 500 people or a fifth of a person. They don't know.
None of their business.
Right. All they know is that, okay, we're dealing with Strong Island Media Shy. That's the agency we're dealing with right now, so we have to function and look at them as that. And Scoop represents that, but we don't speak to Scoop. We speak to his attorney. Now, the attorney gets 10% regardless of what goes on, but it's a 10% well-earned for me because businesses do not respect family. I'll say it that way. And when they don't respect family, when it's family, I'm talking about people. And I'm talking about family like us family. That's not what business is into. They're not into family, they're into money. And that's all they respect. So knowing that business does not respect family, which means they don't respect you, you have to position yourself to deal with them with what they do respect. And they respect business. So I'm up here speaking to you as Scoop Jackson. That's cool. But when I'm out there in the workforce, there is no Scoop Jackson. There's Strong Island Media Shy. That's who you all got to fuck with, not with me.
All right. Let me get the sister in the back right here with a hand raised. I want to make sure we at least get one sister the question. You with the green and white, if I can see correctly. I got smudges on my glasses, so apologies.
Hi, so my question is for Jeffrey and Kenneth. So as an entrepreneur, what is your advice from a legal standpoint and from a manufacturing standpoint on how to get started? What would be the first 1 or 2 steps to get started?
I would start with the lawyer, so.
I would not start with a lawyer. I would start with a business plan because you can't get to where you're going without the proper plan. And oftentimes people have great products that they don't know what to do with when they're made and when they need to go out into the marketplace. So you need to look at your life cycle from beginning to end and where you want to go. Then I would put the legal pieces in place. I would incorporate, I would look at your intellectual property and what you need to protect, whether it's a trademark, a patent, a copyright, and then I would kick it over to Jeff to get your product made.
So I'll start with this question. Where are you at in your process?
I'm at the very beginning stages, so I'm at the idea.
Okay.
That's it. But I
Have
need
the
help.
idea.
Huh?
You have the idea.
I have the idea.
Has anybody ever made something that in the ballpark of what you want to make?
Not together, no.
But they've made pieces.
They've made pieces, but they don't want to do what I want to do.
So I would suggest, for me, so the example is, and I'm also hyping up my own shit, is that, so this shoe
Yes.
right here, me going to factories, in one factory I worked with, I threw a flyer out and was like, yo, I made this shoe for you. Can you just make one in high-tech materials? If you do it, I'll buy it. I was basically talking shit to the factory owner. The next trip I took to that factory, he hands me a box and says, how many pairs you want? I had no brand, I had no nothing, but I had talked shit and I gotta back it up. So I bought 2,000 pairs. On the flight home, I named the brand 99 Products because 99% of the people I know don't have access to all the cool shoes that come out. They're not, they just don't have access, whether they can afford it or whether they can get to the accounts that buy, but that sell them. And so I had to learn how to actually then manufacture my own shoe. I'd done it for a whole bunch of other people, but I didn't know. And so just practicing, and one of the things I'd say to all my teammates, whoever, practice with other people's money. Practice their ideas with their money and learn how all those things work, don't work, and then when you get your opportunity. So the reason I was able to make my own shoe, make it in the colors I wanted, put it in a box, put it in a warehouse, and sell it, because I'd already done it for other people using their money. So now when I'm doing it with my money, I'm not practicing. I'm not making it up. So if you get the opportunity, that's why I ask, if there's somebody doing something close to what you want to do, start there. Help them with their ideas in the places that you're not quite sure. They will make sure, if they know what they're doing, that you're not going to mess theirs up, but you will learn how to then execute against your own project.
That's it. I think on that we're going to conclude.
Appreciate
Thank
that.
you guys for listening. Appreciate y'all, man.
Thank you all. Thank you all.